business leader. If you lose their attention, you got no chance to persuade them. Don't miss today's episode on how to keep their attention.
People get caught up in selling a product. Everyone's got a product. Why does it matter what you're selling?
Right.
What is the benefit? Why should anyone care? People will only remember 10% of what you say 3 days later. It's making it memorable, and if you make it memorable, you have a chance to win the persuasion battle.
Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
And man, are we fired up for Shane Reed. Welcome, Shane.
Thank you for having me.
We got a new phrase in the True North office. What would Shane say about that?
That's right.
And hopefully you'll start saying that in your office. How are you? What's up?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here, going to the fair this afternoon. So
that's the Texas State Fair, if you don't live in Texas. What are you most excited about the fair?
Boy, that's a good question. My brother, of all things, won an arts and crafts award for some sort of hobby. So I've got to go
like
find
this year?
that
Really?
exhibit. Yep.
Okay.
Some sort of antique photo of my grandmother won a prize. So, the State Fair, for those who aren't in Texas, like maybe 100 categories of winners in different arts, crafts, cooking, etc. So I got to go find that in this huge building.
So what was his submission?
It was my grandmother's photo, antique frame. That was one. And then he had a Buddy Holly magazine that he was on the cover of Time magazine. So that won some sort of collectible honorable mention.
Very cool.
So there's a lot to do out there.
Drop us a pin of where you find that in the, because no offense to your brother, but that could be kind of buried. That's probably not right next to Fletcher's corny dogs.
That's right.
I wouldn't imagine.
That's not on people's top list of things to do.
Will you get a corny dog?
And that's, if we finish before lunchtime, I would get a corny dog. So that is the plan, yeah.
Does your brother do that every year?
He does it too often, yeah.
Too often.
So he's a collector.
Yeah, it's a thing.
So is he older or younger?
He is older, and I guess his claim to fame is most people seek famous autographs. He seeks the not-so-famous autographs.
Okay.
What's his name?
Mike.
Mike. Love that. You found a niche. This guy just went to court every day for the federal government every day. At least you're doing something incredible.
That's right.
Is this his hobby, or is it a?
It's a hobby, kind of, but he
It's
will,
serious though.
I can't think of it. Like if someone's famous is in a newspaper, he will get them to sign the photo of the newspaper.
Yeah. Not
get their photograph to use on something else. So there's a lot of room out there for the not so famous autographs.
I bet. Yeah. Interesting. That's great. Well, you picked a great day to go to the fair. The weather's amazing. Wednesday afternoon. So yeah.
It should be good.
Shouldn't be too crowded.
Seriously, at the Texas State Fair, I need to know what's on the food list. Is that not a priority? It's you and your wife going.
Oh yeah, it's the Fletcher's corny dog. That's number one priority.
Yeah.
And then some other fried food winner. I'll figure out which one that is this year. I don't know.
Yeah.
Y'all go every year?
Almost every year, yep.
Do you go track down your brother's stuff every year?
And I do that, yeah. So that's
You're
good.
a good brother.
You go to the car park? What do y'all like to do?
Watch the auto building, the fair. May look for a blender. So they got a lot of blenders.
What is
talking out there?
What's the blender? What is that?
Oh, you haven't seen it where they demonstrate all the different
home appliances?
Yes. No. You get seated 5 rows deep for a 30-minute. This is the best new blender you've ever seen. They throw all the stuff in it, make a smoothie, and they sell you on it.
How did I not know this?
Yeah, because you're busy eating corny dogs.
I did not see that. They're probably putting vegetables and things, but of course, the state fair. All right. Heard you and your wife. Tell us her name.
Linda.
Heard you and Linda and your son.
Christopher.
Christopher went to Yosemite recently. Give us some highlights. And
I think the biggest highlight, do not wait till I'm not going to give my age away, but the late 50s to get to Yosemite. Incredible. Go in October. One of the big impressions, if you drive from Reno to Mammoth Lakes, California, 3.5 hours, just wide open spaces.
Wow.
I mean, it's not just Texas.
Yep.
It's Nevada, as we all know, Montana, Colorado. I was just blown away. I just thought Nevada somehow was densely populated.
Yeah.
Not at all. And then you got Yosemite, which covers so much of California I didn't realize. So loved it.
That's great.
Absolutely spectacular.
Perfect time of year to go. No crowds. Nice weather. Yeah.
I think I told you, Shane, in fact, when I called him and asked him to be on the podcast, he's like, Doug, I'm halfway up a hike in Yosemite. Can I call you later? And I was like, why are you even answering the dang phone? He was too nice to answer the phone. But I did tell him the next day, my son, Mac, and I went out there when he was maybe a senior in high school, and we camped in the easternmost part called Tuolumne Meadows. And he likes to be in a tent, and we went to, of course, to Academy and bought all this terrible fried or freeze-dried food. And the second day in, I realized we were half a mile away from this mail depot for all the people that hiked the Pacific Trail, and people would send them supplies. But also in that depot was a grill. And so you could get a hamburger and a full breakfast. So that was perfect camping for me because we were in Yosemite, we did all these hikes, but I didn't have to eat freeze-dried food.
Yeah, we were in an Airbnb.
No freeze-dried?
No roughing it like that. So a different experience.
Oh, all right. Where are you from?
Dallas.
Okay. All right. Where'd you and Linda meet?
Highland Park High School. So I've been here all my life except for...
So she's from here as well?
Same class. Yes.
When did you start dating?
Senior year high school, then many years after that, did not date. And then when I went to law school, we kind of started dating again.
Okay. So where'd you go to law school?
Texas.
Okay. Was there any other choices?
Oh, I guess there were. I've kind of forgotten what they were. But I went to Yale undergrad, and I wanted to come back to Dallas or Texas because I'd heard of all the fun people had at undergrad at Texas while I was stuck up east at Yale. Grinding away. And I said, I want to get back to Texas. So that was, it was easy.
Yeah. How was your experience at Yale?
Yeah, it was, I had culture shock the first year.
You did?
Just kind of my fault, just kind of an isolated environment here in Dallas. And I got back up on the East Coast and realized I kind of lucked into Yale, and other people have been gunning for it for a long time through private schools, and just they were a lot better prepared for an Ivy League first year class than I was.
Was it? Yeah. What was the cult? Was it just workload?
You played tennis at Highland Park, right?
So played tennis.
And
yes.
then you went to play tennis at Yale,
right?
Yeah.
Did tennis really drive you there? Or?
Yeah. So that was a big decision.
Yeah.
Where could I play and have the best opportunity? And then, I mean, just Yale. Like the first English class was read, the Odyssey the first week. Like that. That wasn't
about how many pages is that?
Yeah, I know, right? So that was not in my skill set to do that. So I dropped that class and found
another one.
Which was it? They're not that many easy ones there. So that was just part of it.
Yeah, yeah. But just meeting probably people internationally as well, or just
internationally, nationally, with a lot of different great viewpoints. And I just it came from a very homogeneous area, and it just was wonderful for me, but it took a little bit of getting used to, right?
But the tennis was really important to you, and why? Just the competitive nature of it, or
Yeah, I loved it at the time. I had my sights on turning pro after college.
So you didn't necessarily go to Yale thinking you wanted to be a lawyer, or did you?
No, I definitely went there for the academics.
Yep.
Knowing that tennis probably wouldn't work out, but I still had that goal. Still wanted to give it a shot. So it was a combination of, can you play tennis at Division I at a high level and get a great education? And Yale was just a perfect fit for that. But the first year was a little hard. Juggling all that, tennis, the academic, not being quite as prepared as others were, and different viewpoints, which was wonderful. I kind of missed Dallas a lot.
You did?
Yeah.
I, a little bit later in my career path, but I moved to New York after graduating from Baylor. And it was a very similar experience, just culturally very different. And, first year was actually great. But then, year 2, year 3, the longer I was in New York, the more I wanted to get back to Texas and, just be with things that were familiar. But I appreciated the diversity of perspectives and experience, and I wouldn't trade it.
Yep.
But it was hard the first year.
Yeah, and back then, I know it's changed now. I mean, Texas was still kind of looked down on by the East Coast,
For
and
sure.
people weren't moving south and southwest. And there was certainly you're from Dallas.
Yeah.
Like you're not from Boston, Philadelphia, New
You didn't
York.
belong.
Right.
So you already started a leg or behind everybody else in at least their attitude. So,
Yeah.
but I could live there now. So I love it, but
Yeah.
What? So you play 4 years. You
yes.
play all 4 years.
Yep.
How'd
When
the
do-
team do?
So because we had 2 really good players when I got there, we did better the first year or 2.
Yeah.
And then when they left, and they actually did make the pro circuit, you wouldn't know their names,
Yeah.
but one played Davis Cup for Canada, another was top 100 in the world.
Give me a shot.
Glenn Leyendecker and Martin Wassenholm. You
No, I don't.
wouldn't know those names.
You knew that,
But they were
but
successful.
yeah.
And so after that, we didn't do as well, but we were good those first 2 years because
Yeah.
we had 2 really good players at the top.
Yeah.
What number do you normally play?
Well, I started out 6, finished at 2.
Let's
Senior
go.
year.
Progress.
I've made some progress. Yeah.
That's
So
great.
that was
Yeah.
good.
1 through 6, if you're listening, play, or is it 1 through 7 typically?
Yeah. 1 through 6. And I assume it's the same
Yeah,
way now, but they've changed the formats a little bit. But yeah, 1 through 6 for singles and then 1 through 3 for doubles.
Yeah. All right. When do you decide to go to law school?
Now, that was pretty easy. So everybody from Yale either went to investment banking in New York, med school, or law school.
Hmm.
I mean, those were just kind of the 3 channels you went through. And if you were kind of liberal artsy like I was, law school made the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you knew, probably pretty early on, you knew law school was the track.
Well, I knew
Because-
med school wasn't the track, and I knew investment banking wasn't the track. And so, I was drawn to law school because I studied political science.
Yep.
Wanted to be a politician. I thought the best way to be a politician would be to know the law,
Yeah.
and it just made a lot of sense to do that.
Why do you think early on you wanted to be a politician?
Well, I wanted to help others
Wow. It's awesome.
and thought that was the best way to do it. And then I realized pretty soon at college, when I got to law school, I realized, politics is a whole different skill set than just studying politics and poli-sci, and a skill set I didn't have.
Were you influenced by a politician younger, though, that you saw that side of it? Or was it what you read that, because unfortunately, I think you had the right perspective on politicians to serve. Obviously,
Right.
we see it much more manipulative now. But I'm curious why that impacted you, that felt like a place of service.
I don't know. It was just something I was fascinated studying. So every class was either history or political science,
Interesting.
how our government's run and the history of our government. And I saw great people there doing public service that I was reading about. I thought, I would like to be like that,
Interesting.
whether it was elected politician or serving in the White House or in Congress in some ways. That just looked very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. There wasn't one particular politician that drew me into it.
Yeah. So you go to University of Texas Law School.
Yep.
And walk us through kind of that phase and where you and Linda are and all that
Oh,
process.
so bringing Linda back into this. So-
Absolutely.
so Linda was my year. So she graduated Texas and then she moves back actually to DC, not back, but to DC.
Okay.
So I'm in Austin and
She's in DC.
She's in DC.
And because you're not dating through college.
We're not dating through
Yeah,
college.
Are you keeping in touch at all?
Kind of.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we were like best friends in high school.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
But had the homecoming date.
yeah.
She had no idea this would be on the podcast. So this is hello,
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So got to University of Texas Law School. First day of class, everyone is so gung ho, and I'm so burned out.
Interesting.
Like I've been pushing my whole life:
Yeah.
tennis, academics. And I'm like, oh, this is...
I've made a mistake.
I'm sweating now just thinking about it. Yeah, it was way too soon to go into a grind. And surprisingly...
Because you did that literally the 3 months. You did the summer and then you went straight there, of course. Yep.
And law school is harder than Yale was.
Yeah.
So it was hard. So I'm not sure I answered your question. So Linda's in DC. But my experience in law school was kind of realized somewhere along the way politics wasn't the answer. And I thought, well, I want to be a trial lawyer.
Yep.
And that was a way to serve the public, thinking that one day I'd work for the Department of Justice was my goal. Like, oh, I can't serve in politics. I don't quite have whatever that is, the drive or the skill set to be a politician. But I'd love to be in a courtroom, helping others, doing public service, Department of Justice. And then the short version, second year, Linda moves back to Dallas and we start dating. So
University of Texas Law School is in Austin. I'm confused, right?
Oh, yeah. So then we commuted.
You commuted. Okay. All right.
It's not too far.
Yeah.
It's only 3 hours away.
Exactly.
Versus half a country apart.
All right. So walk us through.
It was an easier drive back then.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, exactly. Temple Belton was not the 30-year construction project that it is or was now. So walk us through, Shane, graduation, first job.
All right. So lots of, as we all know, in business and wherever, closed doors lead to other things.
Yep.
So got a law school, went to a big law firm, Aiken Gump, which is a great law firm. But I thought, oh, I'll be a trial lawyer at Aiken Gump. And I soon realized, cases aren't going to trial. And especially at big firms, the cases are so big, that's just not going to happen.
Yep.
And I spent maybe a 2-year process thinking, I want to be a trial lawyer. Where those openings still had kind of not politics, but this idea of Washington, D.C. is the center of a lot of energy in this country.
Yeah.
And that's where the Department of Justice is. And got a job at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. after my 3rd year. Happiest day of my career, and got to move up to D.C. So I got to do D.C. without being an aide to a congressman or something, but be a trial lawyer. So it was perfect. And I was there for 6 years and then transferred back to Dallas in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Well, give us some highlights, give us some difficulties of those 6 years in D.C.
So before we go there, how did you go from Aiken Gump to D.C.? What was the process of the networking to get to that position? I mean, it's because clearly I'm sure you were doing well at Aiken Gump and they probably didn't want to see you leave. But yet you had this other goal in mind. So how did that all come about?
That's a very hard job to get, to be an assistant U.S. attorney. So I had a mentor, Larry Gibbs, who was the former chairman of the IRS. And then my roommate's father at Yale was the deputy secretary of the Treasury. And so those two were able to write letters, and it takes a lot of work, as we all know, right? To get to these places we want, you just can't wait for lightning to strike. Oh, there's Shane in Dallas at some office at Aiken Gump.
Let me pick Shane up and move him over here.
Right. So with that, I had some mentors that were able to kind of navigate the Department of Justice, because there's so many jobs to work there. Public service, you can do environmental crimes, you can do civil rights, any number of things, but they helped me. And that was how I got the interview.
That's great.
And then I had to sell myself once I was in the interview.
Sure.
But that was the trick.
So where'd you find yourself in the Department of Justice? What were you doing? And what are some of the
so the U.S. Attorney's Office. So U.S. Attorney's Office is unique in D.C. in that it prosecutes local crimes like the local DA in Dallas would, and the federal crimes that a typical U.S. Attorney's Office did.
Okay.
So it was fascinating as I was doing all the street crimes, muggings, robberies, murders, in addition to what are kind of federal crimes, such as large narcotics cases and stuff like that. So you get it's just great training ground.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, obviously lives are at stake in all of this, but just repetition. And that's, you were getting so many repetitions, and we've learned that as on decision points, we're trying to constantly serve a business owner and give them some extra reps from other people's experience, right? How do I learn from other people's positive and negative? So you're seeing so many cases, and you're going to trial a lot in these cases, correct?
Correct. Yeah. There's a lot of volume to it.
You were living in trial.
Living in trial.
Versus Aiken Gump, where you were never going to see trial.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're having this mindset of, I'm not prepared, because you don't know which of your stack of cases is going to trial, because you have so many. The one in the middle is going, and then you quickly have to get comfortable getting up to speed, telling an effective story and being persuasive, and not be thinking about all the negatives like, oh, I wish I had more time to get ready, because you can't prepare 20 cases. There's just not enough time.
Correct.
Why do it?
You got to prioritize.
You have to prioritize, and you don't know the priority till the judge says, that's the one that's going, because there's so many.
And obviously, we're going to get all the way into it, but how we all as business owners, leaders, people become better communicators in the different buckets of our life. But I'm just curious, those first 6 years, as you're getting so many reps, what are you learning about communication in those early years? What worked, what didn't work?
I learned that most people weren't doing it the right way. They were all doing it like we'd been taught in law school.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, there was one book that everyone read. It was called Mauet's book on trials. And so when I lost my first trial, I said, well, I want to get better. Why did I lose? Because I thought I had a decent case, thought I did everything right that I'd been taught in law school. And I looked around, and everyone was kind of doing the same thing I was. Some were doing more successful than me, obviously, because they didn't lose their first trial. But I wanted to find out what the great trial lawyers in my building were doing. There weren't many. And then when I found them, I realized they were doing something completely different than what we'd all learned in law school, right?
Intriguing.
Not the textbook, not what the professors had taught, because the big secret is most professors at law schools have never been in a courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
So they're super smart and they know everything, but they have very little practical experience.
Mm-hmm.
So they're teaching not from their experience, but because they know it very well, but it's all textbooks, right? So I'm sure the same happens in business school and other things.
And which is so frustrating, because if we were so smart, we would do what you did. You'd go follow and emulate the most successful lawyers and learn from them. But that whole education piece is reversed.
And then there's another thing there's hard to answer, is why wasn't everyone doing what I was doing?
Right.
And I think a lot of people are just satisfied with being okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm successful.
Right.
Don't need to reach the mountaintop because I'm doing fine. And it takes energy and a curiosity.
And a drive
It's right.
Yeah. Yes. And then you have to recognize it, right? You have to, that is different.
Yeah.
And that's what sets someone apart.
So what were those couple of lawyers that were really doing it different versus the textbook?
Mm-hmm.
What were the clear things that you saw them doing that were different, kind of at first impression, right? I mean, as you grew in your career over time, you probably saw lots of things that were nuanced, but there were probably one or two things initially where you were like, wow, that's really different.
I think the two main things were they were telling a compelling story.
Right.
Like very compelling story, not just this is what happened, but this is why it's important what happened.
Building context, building history, bringing in lots of additional detail.
Yes, and then they were the most prepared person in the
room. Yeah.
So they knew it, but they were able to distill it to a very compelling story for the jury or the judge or whatever the situation was. So I guess, Scott, the other thing I learned, you just don't walk in and do it. It's the prep work, finding what witness you need to tell your compelling story. What's that piece of evidence that I need so I can tell a compelling story? So it's not just talking charismatically. It's like, I've got the facts to bring that to you. So
I got one follow-on question. So they were prepared. So how were they able to get more prepared? Because I'm assuming they had the same stack of 20 or 30 cases and they didn't know which one. And so what was the edge that they had that gave them the ability to be prepared with the stack?
That's a great point. So when you're starting out, at the low level, you do have a stack of 20 cases, but the big cases are the murder cases, the big drug cases. Those, they're going to trial. You do have the time to prepare for those. And that's the advantage they had. But it wasn't just they had time. They knew how to construct a story that would be very compelling and not just interesting. Persuasive, right? You're trying to persuade a jury to put someone who's done something wrong away. So
I want to push in there a little bit. We're talking to help and serve business owners and leaders. What are the elements of a compelling story?
The most simple answer I have, and the important one, is everyone tells what happened. It's why does it matter what happened? So the key to any story is, I can just simplify it in a car wreck case, right? Well, what happened was 2 cars got into an accident. The why is, they ignored safety. They deprived this person of the right to get home from work. You make it much bigger than the what happened. It's why does this trial matter? It's about following rules. It's important to keep a lookout. It's not that, she hit him because she wasn't keeping a proper lookout, right? I mean, how boring is that? So the same thing is business. People get caught up in selling a product. Okay, well, everyone's got a product. Why does it matter what you're selling?
Right.
What is the benefit? Why should anyone care? Not, we got the greatest product and it took us 10 years to make and here it is so why?
Shane, you and I've had this conversation. I was taught this years ago from a person tremendous marketer. From the business standpoint, most people sell benefits, they sell features,
right,
not benefits. In your background, the benefits is the why. This allows me flexibility. This allows me more time with my family. The feature is you have a phone on your camera. Or
a camera on your phone.
I have a camera on my phone. Exactly. And so I think that's that right there. And I love that you said, I'm going to keep it simple. I think that's one of the hardest things is we make things just too complex.
Well, to me, I think about it a little bit differently, but I think about it as framing, right? Because we have all this information coming at us. And so how do I organize what you're about to tell me in the context or the frame of the larger picture? Like, where does this piece of information, where does this story, where does this data, whatever it is, where does it fit in the larger context of everything that I'm dealing with so it's sort of like centering that.
Right. And what I like to share that I think the trial lawyers have an advantage that I can share with business owners is that we're having to persuade, as we all know, people who don't want to be there.
100%.
Who has ever said, I'm sure Scott and Doug, hey, I got a jury summons. How can I get down there early so I can get ready to serve under the Constitution? Because this is one of the greatest rights.
I'm so excited to go down there and do this. Yeah.
This is my right to do it, and it's in the Constitution, and how can I do it? I always get the call, how can I get out? What do I do? What happens if I don't show? So you have this group of people there at this trial. The worst thing to do is get selected they do not want to be there. And so giving them the why, then by the end of the trial, you've got them and they feel like, this is the best thing I've ever done as far as public service.
Yeah.
They feel that way.
Great.
So,
all right.
So back to the 6 years in DC. No. Well, so you were in DC for 6 years.
Right.
And that was great, I'm guessing, but you wanted to get back to Texas. And are you guys married at this point?
Yeah, so we're married, had a couple of kids. There was an urge to get back to our family in Dallas. And so you would think a transfer would be easy, but not so easy because just as much as people want to work in DC at the U.S. Attorney's Office, the same thing is true for the Dallas office.
Okay.
Depending on your location and your desire. So that took a while. And I came to finally, after some time, got to the Dallas U.S. Attorney's Office.
Similar process of needing people to write recommendations and letters and all that, or
all that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So just because you'd worked in DC didn't automatically give you the.
There are just too many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very competitive, and even more so now. So it was, yes, that process.
And in Dallas, only federal.
Correct.
No local.
No local crimes, because we have because we're not a district of Columbia that's governed by Congress. Right. So just federal.
So all told, you spent how many years essentially as a trial attorney?
Well, 30. 6 in Dallas and 22. That's not right. 24 in Dallas. Yeah.
So as we kind of, we were talking about this earlier, persuasive communication and storytelling, because I want to go back to from the moment the people who don't want to be there are sitting in the courtroom, you've got to start telling your why immediately, because you got to try to get exactly. But we kind of think about, well, let me just pause there. From the moment you would first address, tell us how you would approach that very cold audience. Because in a business, we might think of this as a sales cold call, right? So you got 100 or so people in that room, and they don't want to be there. How are you going to win them?
Well, we know first impressions are everything. So I want to stand up and thank them and just get them to immediately like me. Mm-hmm. So show that I care through eye contact and telling them very quickly what my case is about. But it all starts with a thank you. Yeah, I know you've had a long day. You've been waiting around. My name's Shane Reed. I'm genuinely trying to connect with them with my eyes, my emotions, so that they will throw down their guard, because they don't want to make eye contact, and they're ready. They're looking at their watch thinking, when's this going to be over?
What are you trying to build there in that moment?
Well, just the rapport. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to get them to like you, and it's not getting them. You just have to be likable, right? Mm-hmm. Make a connection.
Yep.
A lot of lawyers and a lot of business professionals have notes. They're looking down. It's all about what I'm about to tell you, as opposed to, first thing, well, I know you've had a long morning. I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to make this easy for you. I know your time is valuable. Oh, when they hear those words, I mean, any business context, if that's the first thing you say to someone, I know your time's valuable. How much time do you have in a business setting? Instead of just assuming they're going to give you 30 minutes, maybe their schedule's changed and they want something less, and I'll make it work for you. So in a jury, you can't do that. But that's what you're trying to convey. And
so pause.
Yes, yeah, sure.
Pause, because what would Shane do right now? Shane would put those cards down.
Oh, put down the notes. Right?
See, I got a lot to learn. Keep going.
So hold on. Let's go back for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So, because we're starting to get into the detail here, and I just want to fill in one piece of context.
Oh, sure.
So you observe these attorneys that were doing it a different way. You see that they're telling stories. They're well prepared. And so you begin to take that on in your own practice, right?
Yes.
You adopt that kind of philosophy. Help the listeners, help us understand, because this is your evolution as a trial lawyer and the skills that you picked up over time and that now you're teaching to business owners and leaders. But what were some of the key things that you started to do differently right away after you sort of figured out that these guys were doing it differently?
I think it's all individual. The hardest thing for me was I had a legal, when I was talking to a jury, I had a legal pad with a lot of notes because I wanted to get them all the facts of my case. I didn't want to forget something. And so that was kind of my security blanket. Mm-hmm. And I was very good at telling what happened.
Yep.
And then I realized, as I said, not only were they telling a great story, they didn't have notes. They were making eye contact. They thought it out very well. And so they were connecting with jurors. And that's a scary thing to do, look someone in the eye like I'm doing to you right now, right? But you got to practice it. And if you practice it, that was the big difference for me, was not just walking in there, here's what it's all about, putting all that beside and speaking from your heart about
which you've coached me to do.
This case is about. Not, even if it's a boring assault case. Well, assaults aren't boring, but a boring traffic case, which we didn't handle. But you just got to make it important. And anything is important because you're there.
Right.
Like this moment's important because we're decide to spend our time doing this.
100%. It's the old, it's only a minor procedure if it's not you having the procedure done to you.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were in the traffic accident, it's incredibly important to you.
Right.
So you have to build that relatability to them.
So another question.
Go.
So I imagine this is how I would think about it if I'm you. I'm out of law school. I'm now in DC. I'm in all these trials. I have lots of information. I have lots of data, lots of things that I want to communicate. Did you find that, because I experience you now as a very measured, thoughtful, just very paced communicator.
Right.
Was that always the case? Were you in a hurry when you were young because you had all these things that you wanted to communicate?
That's a good point. I wasn't hurried, but I was shy. I was uncomfortable actually being in front of a jury. I got nervous, and I realized that if you become vulnerable, that's how you let people in, and that's how you can communicate with the jurors or whatever the setting is. So for me, it was getting rid of this layer of protection, notes, not getting close to the jury, because emotionally, not that I was would cry or anything, just like I am who I am.
Yeah.
This is what. So getting total transparency. So it wasn't that I was speaking. I speak too quickly, but I wasn't inundating with information. I was kind of going measuredly with information that wasn't very interesting because I was going through my list in a very organized way.
So talk to us about how you created that connection by being vulnerable. Because we were actually just talking about this right before you got here, about how important that is in terms of creating a connection with someone. And so it's a little easier one-on-one because we can just have a conversation. But with a jury, how are you able to be vulnerable with them to start to allow them in to trust you, really, is what you're trying to get to.
That's right.
Well, a couple of things. It's easier for us just because we've met each other before and we know each other, right? But I think one-on-one, if you don't know somebody, that can be a very nerve-wracking experience, even though it's not what we think of public speaking, just because you haven't met them. So for the jury, I always thought once you get rid of the notes, you're vulnerable just without notes.
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
Well, here I am.
Yep.
I am at the risk of forgetting things. Yeah. I'm at the risk of letting someone down. So I had one trick. I would have a little outline on my table, the counsel table in the courtroom next to a bottle of water. So I knew if I had to go, if it all failed, the safety was close by.
Yeah.
But it wasn't with me. So when you walk up there to a jury without notes, they immediately like you.
100%.
Because they know, oh, he's going to talk to us.
Yeah.
Second trick is to make it interesting. And then Jerry Spence was this great trial lawyer. And I read in one of his books that he was not afraid to say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just admit it.
Yeah.
So now you've got
Call
the vulnerability.
Correct. Yep.
And now they've got some sympathy for you. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot believe I've forgotten the most important thing I wanted to tell you. Well, if it doesn't come to you, do you mind if I go look at my notes? I want to get this right. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of
relatability,
kind of goosebump relatability that everyone's afraid to do.
Yep.
Because they'd rather not make the mistake.
Correct. They don't want to look weak.
I'll look weak. And what happens is I've never had to do that, but I'm prepared to do it.
Yep.
And it's that vulnerability that allows people in, and then you can go look at your notes and go, oh, wow, Shane cares.
Yep.
He cares about us.
He's a human being. He's real. He forgets
because
stuff
why?
too.
About care?
Why?
What's the quote?
Oh, because it's the Teddy Roosevelt quote that people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And that's been a truism for a long time, ever since he said it. So
what I love about what you said, and I want to just pull it out again, because Shane's coached me a little bit, and he coached me to leave my notes behind.
Yep.
And it was something that, was a little bit bigger than I could just leave my notes behind. But I I'm being challenged by that because as soon as you walk up to a podium with no notes, like you're vulnerable.
Yep.
Right. But in the vulnerability is where authenticity has the ability to come out. Whereas if it's all pre-directed, prescribed, mechanical, you can't really, it's harder for that authenticity to come out.
Right. Because they think you're rehearsed.
Mechanical and you're rehearsed and all those things. So I really, maybe our business leaders, we can challenge them to think about being unrehearsed, being not unprepared.
Exactly. I was going to interrupt you. Right. So not unprepared.
Not unprepared, but unrehearsed, unscripted. Maybe not unrehearsed, but unscripted, to then be able to show up with more authenticity and then build relationships with whoever it is that you're speaking to.
Right. And in a courtroom, just like in business, but people don't do it in the courtroom and they don't do it in business. In your trial, you've got to be able to be flexible and shift to the argument that is being presented. So if the other side does an opening statement and you've got yours and you've spent a week doing the opening statement you want to deliver, but if they say something wrong or inconsistent or you see a weakness, you just put that down and go, you know what? I want to talk about the one thing Shane didn't mention. And that is this. And now you're connecting with the jury. Mm-hmm. You're being flexible because you've left your notes and everything you prepared behind. And you're addressing what? The needs they have, because the need of the moment is it's just changed. The argument's changed, the shift, the interest. And if you stick to it, everyone else just sticks to what they've done because it's safe.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
And this is what I've got to present to you in business, my product, whatever. Oh, no, that's not the need. It's a different need you weren't expecting. And if you deflect from that, you're not answering the question, right? Mm-hmm. You're just not being authentic or vulnerable or helpful.
Right.
Or persuasive.
So what I heard you say there is the key to great communication probably starts with.
Let me share a quick story if we got time for. So I did study great lawyers. And I wrote a lot of textbooks for lawyers and then now for business professionals on persuasion. And Brian Stevenson, he's one of the greatest civil rights attorneys in the country. He's before the Supreme Court all the time. And what I would do and you would do and anyone else, we would take a lot of information up to that podium to talk to the 9 justices who are smarter than anyone, right? Because they know the law better than anyone. But what he does, he takes up a blank sheet of paper and a pen. I said, Brian, why do you do that? Because no one else is doing that. Mm-hmm. And he's representing death row inmates. I mean, people no one wants to represent. The guilty of the guilty. He's trying to say, hey, you should delay the execution because it's not being done humanely. 3-time convicted murder. I mean, it's time in society's mind for that person to be executed. So that's the type of hard cases he has. His point is, Shane, it's not an argument. It's a listening exercise. And so business professionals and lawyers, whatever they're saying, we all go in there thinking, oh, this is my chance to give all that I know about what I know, instead of, oh, I want to get the hardest question Scott and Doug have for me, because if I don't get that, I'm not going to succeed in this meeting.
Right.
If there's a question you have that you haven't answered, that I haven't asked me and the meeting's over, I have failed.
Right.
And that's what the great lawyers do. Only a few do it. Same in the business world. Everyone's like, this is all I've got, instead of, let's walk in without notes, the slide deck. Mm-hmm. I've got all this if you want it, but I kind of really want to know what's the problem you have.
Right.
And it may be different than the one when the meeting was set up. It could have changed.
Yeah.
But if you don't ask, you'll never know. And if you don't address it, they may not even ask you because they're like, well, why did I just get wasted all this time?
Right.
So make us the transition between the 30 years to what you're doing now and why you made that transition and what you're learning.
I guess the transition was I wrote these textbooks for trial lawyers. And then my last one was on persuasion for trial lawyers. And then I realized all those principles not only work in the business world, but it's a different angle that the business world hasn't heard. And it's interesting because it's different and it works. And the reason it works is because great trial lawyers know the brain science of persuasion. And we've already talked about how to tell a compelling story. So they got that down. And so that's what I'm sharing with the business world, what great trial lawyers do and the principles that have worked and how you can use them. And it's just a different way of doing what successful business people already do, but gets them to a higher level. And that's what I'm doing now.
So let's go back. So how many textbooks did you write for lawyers?
6.
6. And in your 30-year career, at what point did you write the first textbook?
So that was maybe 2007. So I don't know what point. That's back when I'm in Dallas. And the short version is we're a closed door. I was trying to get to a different section in my office. The door got closed. I was very disappointed. But why? I thought my whole life was meant to be in this particular criminal section.
Yeah.
Right? Why did that happen? And as you all know, when a door gets closed, you can either just be disappointed or get motivated to do something else. If that motivated me, okay, I'm going to write a textbook so other lawyers don't make the same mistakes I made and that I'm seeing others make.
And this was specifically around presentation and the things that you'd learned, or was it around other?
Those trial skills. So how to be effective in the courtroom.
Okay.
Which is presentations through all of that, but how to do an opening statement, closing argument, et cetera. And then just one book led to another. And in my journey, I wrote one book on the greatest trial lawyers in the country. So I met people outside of my sphere, got to interview them, read their transcripts, and you just grow and you broaden your perspective of what is even more persuasive than what you're seeing in your courthouse in Dallas or something like that.
And you're still practicing at this time, but that door had closed, and so you were like, okay, I'm gonna redirect some of this energy to this other effort. Right?
Yeah, actually a lot of energy. So I'm doing consulting full time. I still have my license to practice law, but I don't have time really to do that justice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you'd really been a student of this in the entire arc of your career, right? You started early on and you're like, okay, why are these guys more successful?
Right,
so you were studying the art of this, and then you had it all inside you. You wanted to share it.
Right, which is weird. I didn't know I did. But in DC, I would go watch trials just constantly in my spare time because I had this desire to learn it. And no one else was doing it because they had different desires that fulfilled them in different ways. But yes, you're right.
You love service. You love being the best you can be. And you just kept, that's what's really cool to me is that you constantly have been wanting to improve and learn. And I think that's essential as a leader. Can't ever stop.
So fast forward today, you mentioned the one textbook early on that sort of taught you how to be present in the courtroom and how they taught it all wrong. Is that textbook still in existence?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they're still teaching it the wrong way?
Oh, the one, yes, it's still there. And then mine is used in a lot of law schools as well.
Yeah.
So, right.
And so yours obviously brings a very different approach and perspective.
Right. And a little side note, the reason the other textbooks are still there is just people don't like to change.
Isn't that?
Of course.
So they've been teaching the same syllabus for years, and it takes effort to read a new book, to change, whatever it is.
Well, that's a great recipe for lack of influence. That's what that is.
Right.
To never want to embrace change.
That's fair, yeah.
So, Shane, so you practiced for 30 years, and when did you officially retire, if that's a word?
Yeah, last fall.
Last fall. Okay,
yes.
So this is new.
Yes.
Relatively new.
So I retired from the government. I didn't retire.
I understand. I understand. Well, that's why I said if that's even a word, because we have a whole philosophy around what retirement means.
Yeah.
But okay, so when you transitioned to your new career, did you know this is what you wanted to do right out of the gate, or did you spend some time thinking about it?
Put a lot of thought into it.
Okay.
And not enough just because I'm starting a new business. I just
don't know what you don't know.
Don't know. But I put probably 2 years in planning that this was what I was going to do when I left, because I hit the 30-year mark with the government. So yeah, a lot of thought went into it. Yes.
Okay. At some point though, you still just got to go do it.
Right.
Which is what you did.
It's hard. The business professionals here won't understand. But when you're in the government silo where there are no risk involved, it's public service. But yeah, you're not going to get fired working for the government.
Right.
Yeah, there's a big risk. Like, am I capable of this? Is there a need? Because you don't really know the need until you do it. Because when you're in the government, you can't advertise. I can't ethically start marketing. Oh, this is what I'm going to do in the future. There are all these ethical conflicts because you're a prosecutor, right? So no one could have known that.
Yeah, you can't start until you start.
You can't, exactly.
So you knew you were going to go coach public speaking or persuasion, or how would you characterize it?
That's fair.
Okay. And then did you know it was going to be business owners and leaders, or was it going to be trial lawyers, or was it going to be both, or had you thought that part through?
I hadn't thought that. I'd been told that there was a real need for this in the business world, but I didn't know what that need was because I just had some conversations, if that makes sense. And then I also wanted to train lawyers at law firms on what I've always done, because I've done this for 20 years, either at SMU or other speaking engagements on trial skills.
Yep.
So I knew I had that. And then the public speaking is kind of a third, one-on-one coaching for public speaking was a third avenue. So it's consulting to businesses, consulting to law firms, and then one-on-one coaching with people who have a speech coming up or a conference or whatever.
Yeah. Fantastic. So how's it going?
Well, it's good. I had to send out an invoice yesterday and had a lot of trouble just figuring that out, right? So I've done it, but it's not easy when you're starting on your own, just doing everything.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff I hate about it that's frustrating. What I love is helping people and putting together programs or whatever the need is.
Yeah.
That's my passion. And so this is a really good outlet. And you didn't ask me this, but in the courtroom, you only get to trial couple times a year. So now I get to get in front of people, teach, listen, help, learn from others a lot more often. And so that's very satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Well, so a couple things. There are people that can help you with the invoice.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Right.
So that you don't have to do that.
Okay. Good.
We're big believers in highest and best use and unique ability, and your unique ability may not be sending invoices. So I
think that's fair.
Yeah. We might be able to help you with that.
Okay. Good.
Or introduce you to somebody that can help you. So how's the response from the business community been?
Well, it's been really good. I think my problem is just getting the word out, because having been at the U.S. Attorney's Office for 30 years, I haven't been networking, and I obviously haven't been in the business community, but even in the legal community, it's very easy to get in a silo of being successful in your own small world,
right,
and not reaching out. So that's my challenge, is letting people know. But the response has been very good, because I think a lot of people are looking for something new and different that's helpful. And that's what I try to offer.
And I'm going to put you on the spot there. I want you to address that, because this is where I know that sometimes you continue to see this maybe wall sum up between trial lawyers and business leaders. Everything you say, I just keep seeing the complete, and I know you do too, it's completely transferable. You go into a business meeting and there's objections, how to address objections. But you were an absolute respected expert for 30 years in a field, but you didn't get yourself networked. I want you to address, like YPO and other organizations, staying, I think, so important for business leaders. Excel in your company and blossom where you've been planted, but keep trying to make time to grow your network. I mean, you've run a successful business for 25 years, but you've been in an organization to network and build outside friendships for 15 or so years.
That's right. Yeah. I think, some of it depends on your wiring, right? So, if you're more introverted, it's going to be a little harder.
Right.
If you're more extroverted,
which probably means it's more mandatory if you're introverted.
Exactly.
It's a little easier. I mean, you strike me as a little bit more of an introverted personality.
I am.
Just from the little bit we know of each other. I am too, actually. Most people, when I tell them that, they're like, no, I don't see that. But I recharge by being quiet and drawing away. And then I can go out into the world and run for a day, a week, maybe a month, but then at some point I have to retreat back and sort of recover. And I know that about myself. So I have to kind of pick and choose where the networking happens. But what I found, particularly in Dallas, Fort Worth, is you end up with these sort of concentric circles. So you have your community, your neighborhood, right? You have your schools where your kids go to school. You have maybe a country club. You have a YPO. Maybe you have a philanthropic endeavor, and all of a sudden each of those is a circle, but within each of those circles there's overlap. Right. And so you have this connectivity. So you and I were introduced by a mutual friend who you play tennis with, Scott Morris, and he said, "Hey, my friend Shane is having a presentation on public speaking." And I'd been thinking about that, not only for me, but for our organization. And so I attended, and now we've built this relationship over the last 6 months. But there were a lot of people in the room that day that were probably outside your normal, Justice Department network.
Sure.
And so I do think like just, in the beginning, it's more, I call it hand-to-hand combat, one-to-one, where you just got to go tell your story. And maybe part of it is I'm going to take a Scott Wood or a Doug Hudson or a Scott Morris to get to lunch once a week or twice a week. And I'm going to share my vision for what I'm trying to do, because I've always found that if you'll embrace people in your vision, tell the story, what you're trying to accomplish, people they'll come alongside to help you. So some of it starts with just this one-to-one, and then eventually you figure out how to scale the message, which you're already doing with some of your breakfasts and things that you're doing. So, but I do, there's interconnectedness with all these different communities. And I mean, that's how I've tried to build my network over the years, is just being present in these different communities.
It takes intentionality, especially when you're running a successful business. It takes a real intentionality to even get your head up enough to look outside. I want to ask a couple, what coaching would you have for a CEO, and some tips and tricks of how they should lead their internal staff meetings more effectively?
Well, I guess the first question is, do we need a meeting?
Love that.
That's a good question.
100%.
So why are we having the meeting? Are we having a monthly meeting just because it's on the calendar?
Because somebody said you're supposed to have a monthly meeting.
Right.
So I love that.
Or can we just send out an email with the information or the updates, and we've saved everyone an hour? Second, do we need an hour meeting? Why are we doing an hour meeting? Is it just because 5 people have something to say, and that's how we've done our weekly or monthly meetings, the company? Third, I think that you have to decide, am I a leader, a facilitator, or am I trying to gather information at this meeting? So what is the point of it? And the CEO has to, maybe this meeting is better to take in a blank sheet of paper and just listen. I don't know what the point of the meeting, but there needs to be a purpose, not just that it's on the schedule.
Phenomenal. Keep going. Okay? No, because keep going. Seriously, because first of all, you just said, why is the meeting? What's the purpose? What's the role? Okay? So let's assume that we need to have this meeting.
So I think the other thing is, if you have the meeting, just like a great trial lawyer, what is the why of the meeting? Like, I'm giving you information, the new way we're going to do things, or here are the problems we have. So your staff needs to know, okay, there's a problem, but why is that important? I mean, why is it your problem? Is it our problem? But why is this problem necessary to get us motivated to solve? So you have to motivate them, and you have to do it with the why, not just that we've got a problem, solve it. Well, in the military, that's very good. But if you're trying to motivate people, get them the why this is so important. So, and if you can't motivate them that it's important for them, it's important for me, and this is why I need to do this and need your help. And that's, obviously, they know that's part of their job. But the why really makes a difference. Otherwise, you're not going to motivate people as well as you could.
One of the things I take away from that too, Shane, is sometimes for the leader, the why is you need that. But to be transparent and vulnerable, hey, team, I know this may feel like just a little bit of transfer of information.
Right.
But I need this. And I just don't know if many CEOs will come right out and just say, this weekly touch base is for me. And if it really is, that's a power. One, it's truthful. So I love just the questioning of why. Every single element of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting ready to present to a customer. What should I absolutely not do? What should I absolutely do?
Well, we've already talked about the first thing you do is make a connection with them, not talk about what you have or talk about yourself. So the first thing you do is just show you care. The other thing is make complicated ideas simple.
Mm-hmm.
So the brain science shows that our automatic brain likes ease of information, and our automatic brain is kind of what rules us every day. There's a very reflective brain that's detail-oriented, but it's not running our daily decisions. So our default is make this easy for me to understand. So if you go in there knowing what is their need, because you've listened and you've made a connection, and then you make complicated ideas simple, you're going to win the persuasion battle, or at least you'll have the best chance of winning it next to whoever the competition is, who's doing just the opposite, which is not finding out their need, telling them all I know in a very complicated, detailed way, and I'm already boring because I'm giving you too much information, instead of, hey, Scott, I know your time is valuable. What can I answer? You've got some material. Have you had a chance to look at it? If you haven't, I'll go through it. But if you have, what's the most important thing on your mind?
Mm-hmm.
And then once he tells you, then it's your job to make it simple. This is the benefit I'm offering you, not the product. And then if Scott asks the detailed questions, I'm ready because I've got the details.
Right.
But everyone else starts out with all the details.
Yeah.
PowerPoints and presentations. Companies spend massive amount of energy and time on PowerPoints and presentations. Good, bad, ugly. Coach us up as business leaders on the how and why of PowerPoint presentations.
Right. So I thought trial lawyers had really bad PowerPoints in the courtroom. Not till I've been in the business world have I seen how really and truly bad the problem is. And the problem is it's too much data. Secondly, everyone thinks their PowerPoint is their handout. So they make the mistake of putting a handout that's got small font, too much data, too hard to read as their PowerPoint in their presentation, instead of realizing, oh, I've got a brochure, slide deck, whatever, that's got everything my company you would ever want to know about it. Here it is. Separate from that, oh, now I want to talk to you, and now I want to show you some pictures to tell a compelling story about what we can really offer you.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is if you do all the information right, our attention spans aren't just going to listen to it.
Right.
You'll get bored, and once you lose their attention, you've lost the ability to persuade.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's an in-house meeting that's every week, every month, or a new client, or giving a client a summary. I mean, why would you give a client a summary about what you've done all year if they may not want a summary, right? They may want to just know what the future is.
Yeah.
You got to know what that is. And if you have a rigid slide deck, you may not lose them. You may lose them next year when someone comes along and is more attentive to what they need.
So some would say, like for a really technical sale or a technical conversation that, think institutional, technical, lots of detail, that you have to have all that data. And what you're saying is tell the story, but then have the data sit almost separately.
Right. So every great trial lawyer has the facts to back up what they're trying to prove, just like in the business world. But they don't lead with all those facts until they know what the person needs. And if it is a data, like a very technical presentation,
mm-hmm.
then your slides have to be readable and interesting, or why are you showing it?
Mm-hmm.
So the answer may be, hey, all this data is in the graph that's in the handout that I've given you. Let's turn to page 23 so we can all see it.
Yeah.
But just throwing it up there when no one can read it, and you're seeing how much money the government's poured into the economy in the year 2020, well, you can't read it, and you can't. Why are we talking about it?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah.
One of my favorite moments with Shane in these last 60 days was he was in a meeting with 8 of us, and we continued to build trust. And someone showed him a presentation, and they made the very right decision to ask Shane what he thought. And I appreciated your directness, and so did this person. He said, "Do you really want to know the truth?" And he said, "Yes." He says, "It's terrible." And I loved that candidness.
Yeah.
What I've learned from you in these last 60 days is what most business leaders, we think there's one tool. I really hear you starting to coach us that there are 2 tools. There is the deck with all the data. Then there is
which is a handout.
Which is a handout, a leave behind.
Right.
What I heard you coach us here at True North is, if I am presenting to customers' team publicly or in speaking, that is a presentation. That is simple pictures, attention grabbing, high level. If you want all the data, take this and go read it home. Would you agree with that assessment, or coach us up there?
Right. And it's not dumbing it down, which I think some people think, oh, this is what you're doing. People will only remember 10% of what you say 3 days later. If you put a picture with it, they'll remember 65% of it. So you're not being effective with a bunch of graphs that no one can read and just talking about it. They're not going to remember that. 10%, I mean, that's what it, and common sense tells you that as well. But if I show you a picture, let's say that the government poured all this money into the economy in 2020. Okay, well, and give you all these stats. Or if I say, it's like a sugar high, and showed you a picture of kids bouncing off the walls because they're on sugar, you'll remember sugar high 2020. That's what the government did, as opposed to all the data. And you have the data in the graphs. That's something different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not dumbing it down. It's making it memorable. And if you make it memorable, you have a chance to win the persuasion battle.
Love that.
It's incredible. What else you got for him? I can go all day.
No, that's it. That's good.
You listening, watching, I'll tell you, one of the things that you got me today, Shane, was if you lose their attention, you will not be persuasive. You will lose the persuasion battle. Shane, thank you very much. We're very grateful for you here at True North. I know you've impacted Scott's life. You have mine. You have our company. All of you watching and listening, thank you for being a part of Decision Points.